Alrighty, welcome back everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Apologies for a little bit of a delay. Christmas week got a little bit away from me, but we are back and we got to talk about a ton of different things to go into this show. We got to start. We got to talk about the quarterfinal. We'll talk about the picks for Miami, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas Tech, Alabama, Indiana, as well as Ole Miss, Georgia to finish off the next couple of days. And then we'll get into a little bit of a bowl season catch up. A lot has happened since we last talked, so we will make sure you guys are fully caught up throughout the rest of bowl season. Ends on Friday, so I want to make sure you guys are fully prepped for all the games that have already happened or will happen over the next little bit. And then we'll do a little bit more comprehensive of a breakdown of bowl season once it's officially done with. And then a little bit of the headline catch-up. Obviously, the biggest one being Kyle Whittingham being hired over there at Michigan. Also, D'Anton Lynn leaving USC for Penn State is a rather big thing to watch, and some dominoes falling there in the right direction for USC and Penn State in a lot of senses. So we'll talk about that, obviously, to finish off the show. But let's talk about these games. Let's talk about these quarterfinal games that everyone was talking about how terrible the first round games were, how ridiculous it was. 2G5 teams are in. Well, we've gotten to a place where we have 8 teams left, and I have no problem with the 8 teams that we have in here. I think it's going to be really, really fun the rest of the way. We do have Miami, Ohio State kicking off tomorrow night. Going to be incredible to watch what happens in that game. Miami team that gaining a little bit of juice, especially defensively after that game against Texas A&M. Oregon, Texas Tech, maybe the most unpredictable of the games just because of who knows exactly what Texas Tech is against these elite teams that they're going to have to play over the next couple of games. Then Alabama, Indiana, a team in Indiana that if I told you they were favored by 7 in a Rose Bowl over Alabama 3 years ago, you probably would have thought I was watching a different sport. But at the end of the day, here we are. Indiana, Alabama in the Rose Bowl. And then Ole Miss, Georgia, the only game that is a rematch from earlier this season. And it was a Georgia win, and it was not a lot of defense on that day. We'll talk about it all right now, and we'll start on tomorrow night. We got a great one down there in Arlington. Miami against Ohio State, the number 10 seed against the number 3 seed. Obviously, we just saw what Miami did down there in College Station, holding them to only 3 points. Some weird weather conditions as well in that one, but at the end of the day, there's quite a bit of history between these two teams. Not to mention I don't want to say the best player because I think that's Caleb Downs, but the most forward-facing player on this football team for Ohio State is Jeremiah Smith. He's a South Florida kid, and he said in no uncertain terms that if Miami had their act together a couple of years ago, he's probably a Hurricane right now, which is quite the thought. If he was with Cam Ward a year ago, if he was with Malachi Toney this year, that would have been something to watch. There's no doubt about that, but he is with Ohio State, and he's coming to this one with a little bit of energy. There's no doubt about that. He wants to prove that he is someone that made the right decision going to Ohio State, and he wants to shine in front of the team that didn't look him over by any means. Definitely wanted him very badly, but weren't quite in the position to get a guy like him with their services. But the other side of the ball, the other side of this is Miami kind of needs a defensive battle in this football game. Now, obviously, Carson Beck is a talented kid that can make a ton of different throws, but if you're consistently going to throw into the teeth of this defense, you're going to make mistakes. And there's going to be big-time plays made by Jermaine Matthews. There's going to be big-time plays made by a Caleb Downs or an Arvell Reese in the pass rush. There's going to be problems that present themselves. I think they need a little bit of a rock fight. I think they need to find small run openings. It's going to be a whole lot harder to do that than you did against A&M. This Ohio State defensive line isn't necessarily outright better than A&M's in a number of ways. They are bigger and more physical. There's no doubt about that. Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are different edge rushers than Cassius Howell is, and they're going to be able to hold the edge a ton better in the run game. They're going to be able to play the run better in the run game. With Caden McDonald and all those guys on the interior, it's going to be harder for Mark Fletcher to be the guy in this football game, which means you probably have to get pretty creative. You have to do a ton of different things. You have to make sure Malachi Toney is probably the most impactful player in this football game. I really don't think you have a path to victory unless number 10 totally changes the complexion of this game, whether it's in a punt return or an end around or whatever that looks like. They did it against A&M. You got to find a way to get the ball in number 10's hands, and he has to make a difference in this football game because I don't think you're going to have the run game that you had against A&M. I don't even think you're going to have anything close to that. The other side, you have to have your defense step up against these Ohio State wide receivers. I think you have a very interesting matchup because against Indiana, they confused Julian Sayin pretty much all afternoon. They got to Julian Sayin, I believe, 7 different times in that game in the Big Ten Championship. Miami's defensive line can do that. They can't do it if the back end doesn't give him a little bit of time, because Julian Sayin is more than happy to get the ball out of his hands very quickly, to sort of dink and dunk this way down the field. And let's be honest, if you get Jeremiah Smith moving forward, a lot of special things can happen very quickly. So I think they're going to have to get after him. I think the back end is going to have to step up to do that. It's a little bit different than what they faced against Indiana. Indiana loves to switch things up post-snap. They love to play around with quarterback's eyes, see if they can find some openings, whether it looks like they're playing zone and they rotate down into man or vice versa. It is a very, very tough defense to get a beat on. We'll talk about that in a second with Ty Simpson, but Miami's a little bit different. Miami just kind of lines up and plays. Obviously, there are disguises, there are different blitz packages, there are some interesting things about this Corey Heatherman defense, but they got dudes all over the place. They have absolute freaks of nature all over that football field. They play straight up quite a bit. Is that better for Julian Sand? Can he kind of digest that a little bit better than he did against Indiana and make the throws that he's going to need to make? That'll be the big time question. The other part of it is you got freak show wide receivers. You have guys that don't need much of an opening to make differences. Carnell Tate, obviously, a massive piece whenever Jeremiah Smith is on the field. And then you add in the tight ends with Max Clare. I think Will Kazmarek is going to be huge in this game, and run blocking for Bo Jackson. It is going to be a tough battle. I think it is as good of athletes as you will see on a football field this weekend, or really this season in college football. These are absolute freak shows on both sides of the ball. Which defensive line can make the necessary plays? Not necessarily all sacks. Which defensive line can slow down the other running attack? Which defensive line can keep Bo Jackson or keep Mark Fletcher out of the game? Which edge rusher can make the difference? Will it be a Ruben Bain or a Akeem Mesidor? Or could Caden Curry have a massive game? Could Kenyatta Jackson make the difference? The way that I see this unfolding is I don't think Miami's going to have the run game they had against A&M. I don't think they're going to get the mistakes that they got from Marcel Reed that they're going to get from Julian Sayin. I think they're going to have to push the ball into Carson Beck's hands a couple of times, and I think he's going to give the ball away a couple of times. I think Julian Sayin could as well. I think there could be multiple turnovers in this game for both quarterbacks, but I think Ohio State does well enough. I think they find a way to win this one a little bit ugly, 24-17. I don't think people walk out of this one thinking, okay, that's the Ohio State team we thought we were going to see. They're going to run away with this title. I do think it's a fight. I think it's a short quarter, really hard fist fight. I think Jeremiah Smith makes a special play, and Ohio State's able to win this one by 7 points. But moving forward to probably the most interesting matchup of this entire weekend, my favorite, there's no doubt about it, Oregon against Texas Tech. This one's going to be special. There's no two ways about that. This one is going to be incredible over there in Miami, and I think they'd probably like to swap. If it was up to Miami and Texas Tech, I think they'd love to swap their locations, but at the end of the day, this one's going to be really, really fun. Down there in Miami, tons of big-time questions heading into this football game. Obviously, the Oregon health situation, how much healthier are some of these guys? Is DK Moore 100%? Evan Stewart won't play in this game, which is something to watch as we get a little bit closer. Maybe in the next round he's able to go. At the end of the day, how healthy is Oregon? How much healthier have they gotten since the last time they played? Obviously got a little bit of time to rest some guys in the second half of that JMU game, so hopefully they will be fully ready to roll. And the really interesting thing to watch here, and I think the question that just about everyone around the country is asking about these football games is, can Texas Tech scale? Can they do the thing that they've been doing all year, which is physically imposing their will against a team like Oregon? Because Oregon matches up. No one in the Big 12 matches up physically to what Texas Tech did, and that's why their defensive line was one of the most, probably the most impactful unit in the entire country. They totally dominated every offensive line they faced. I think this is going to be the best offensive line they faced by a margin. I think this is a very, very good group up front. Obviously, the Utah group, very much similar, very good tackles. I think the interior might be a little bit better for Oregon, which gives their run game a little bit more of an opening against an elite group up front for Texas Tech. That's the massive question. Can they scale their performance on the line of scrimmage? Can they scale their performance elsewhere? Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts. Ben Roberts is the name I'm looking for. Two remarkable linebackers for Texas Tech, especially in coverage. They're going to have to deal with Kenyon Sadiq, and that is the best tight end in the country as far as I'm concerned. There are plenty of other really, really talented players. Jamari Johnson made a great play in the JMU game early on in that one. it's going to be an incredible bout. It's two of the best units you will find in this tournament, especially when you talk about coverage linebackers. Texas Tech probably has the best duo in the country. When you talk about tight ends, I'd argue Oregon has the best player at tight end in the country in Kenyon Sadiq. It is going to be incredible to watch this unfold and just see how real Texas Tech is. For Texas Tech, can you negate the talent edge that Oregon does have, especially with your offensive line? Mateo Uyunglele, an absolute nightmare. Bear Alexander, Amari Washington on the interior, nightmares to deal with. You need your run game. Bear Morton is not going to drag you to a win in this football game. You need Cameron Dickey, you need Jacoby Jackson, you need these guys to make big-time plays throughout this game, or you're going to fall short, or you're going to have an offense that sputters at times, that doesn't look perfect. And the big-time question, and one that really has popped up in just about every big-time game for Texas Tech, is they've settled for a lot of field goals. In the red zone, they have left a lot of points on the board, and they've settled for 3. You're not going to be able to do that against this team, because you could have 2 great drives, get down to the 10-yard line, and then you stall, and you have to kick field goals, and then DK Moore makes one big-time play over the top, you're down 7-6. That can't happen in this game. You have to keep your pedal to the metal. You have to probably stay in front for the vast majority of this one, and then force Dante Moore into tough positions. You can do that. If your defensive line shows up the way it has all year, the talent edge is such a fascinating thing to me. It's not a massive one. It's totally different than what Texas Tech has had the rest of the year. They won't have the talent edge the way they had really in droves previously in the Big 12. It is going to be the biggest battle that they have faced the entirety of the year. I think this is a really good Texas Tech team. I don't think we're going to walk out of this one thinking, okay, Texas Tech just played in a bad conference and didn't have the talent to really match up. I also think there's a difference. I think there is a fundamental difference between playing a BYU or a Utah, 2 really good teams, and playing in Oregon. I just think there's a difference on the lines of scrimmage. I think those wide receivers are a little bit too much, and I worry that this Texas Tech offense won't have quite enough firepower to keep up with an offense that can score 14 points at the drop of the hat, the way they showed a couple of weeks ago. So we'll talk about this one, obviously, as it unfolds. Cannot wait for this one to get underway. I think it's incredibly fascinating. But I'm going to take Oregon to win this one. I think Texas Tech, they'll get there in time. I think they're not going anywhere. But I think year one it's going to be pretty tough to win this one. Alabama, Indiana, over there in the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. A fascinating dynamic. One of those that if I told you 3 years ago or 4 years ago, especially 5 or 6 years ago, that Indiana was going to be the number 1 team in the nation facing off against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, you would have thought I lost my mind. It is a crazy, crazy turn of events, and I think the more we talk about Curt Cignetti plenty, we talk about him tons, it still doesn't do justice to what has happened over there in Bloomington. It is absurd what they've been able to do. It should not be possible, and it's going to make it really, really hard for some very good coaches to keep jobs long term, because that's not normal. That's something I will absolutely drill into people's skulls over the next little bit, especially with all the coaching changes that have happened. This isn't normal, and we got to give guys some more time than this, but he's not making life easy. Regardless, zeroing on this game, this is fascinating for so many different reasons. One, because Indiana has been one of the most dominant teams in the entire season. They're top 5 in just about every stat you can possibly think of. Everything is rolling for the Hoosiers in this one. Alabama's finding their way. The big thing about Alabama was, can they get healthy in time for these big-time games? We knew the Oklahoma game was going to be, they're healthy, but they're not fully healthy. The guys are on the field, but how much of an impact can they have? Jam Miller was on the field against Oklahoma. Still made an impact, but he is going to be even more healthy this time around. Josh Cuevas, I've talked about him as many times as I can remember. He is so important to this offense. He will be healthy. Parker Brailsford will be more healthy. And LT Overton's back. That's probably the biggest thing of this. Don't really know what was going on there. Don't know if it was an illness, something. Regardless, he is back on the football field. It doesn't sound like what kept him out is going to slow him down in this football game. If those guys are 100%, this Alabama offense is really, really tough to stop. And LT Overton is a game changer on the defensive side of the football. He did it against Georgia. He did it against a number of teams throughout the season. Vanderbilt, he totally wrecked that game. He can do it in this one as well. Now, it's a really good offensive line on the other side for Indiana, but Indiana walks in with all the confidence in the world. There's no doubt about that. there is something that's going a little bit under the radar. I don't want to say under the radar, but is something to monitor as we go into this football game. Against Penn State, Iowa, Oregon, and Ohio State, I would say the four best defenses that Indiana has played. Fernando Mendoza has thrown a pick in all of them. He's made mistakes in all of them. He's been a little bit all over the place in all of those games. Now he's made massive plays down the stretch. So who am I to say he's played poorly in those games? He hasn't. But there's been moments and there's been small openings, and maybe that's all this Bama team needs. Maybe that's all that Ty Simpson needs to get a little bit of confidence. And we saw what happens when he gets a little bit of confidence, even against an elite defense like Oklahoma. He was a problem, and he's going to put the ball exactly where it needs to go just about every time. Will Fernando Mendoza give him one extra possession than he will give them? That's a question probably for the Indiana defense if they're going to force any problems. Speaking of that, the Stephen Daly injury is a massive, massive deal. This is a guy that played incredible football against Ohio State, was on the field for just about every single snap, which brings me to my biggest problem, my biggest worry for Indiana heading into this one was going to be depth, overall depth of this team, particularly on the lines of scrimmage, on offensive and defensive line. If that guy's not ready to go, the guy behind him is not going to be as good. And it might be a bigger margin than it would be for an Alabama or a Georgia or an Ohio State. It is going to be a tough battle. There's no doubt about that. If Alabama can find small running lanes, we saw it against Oklahoma. It didn't have to be a lot. It was Jam Miller going for 9 yards, going for 8 yards, and then you found one for Daniel Hill going 35 yards. That's kind of all you need if you're Alabama. It doesn't have to be special. It just has to be complimentary enough. That Stephen Daly injury could have a massive, massive impact on this football game. But there are reasons to like Alabama in this game. I think a lot of people are dismissing them as having no shot, or some people are going the total opposite direction and saying they're going to outright win the game, but they have the dudes. If Ty Simpson is playing with confidence, I'm not sure there's a defense that can really stop him. And Indiana loves man coverage. They love to play straight up. These are really talented kids on the other side. And Ryan Williams, who hasn't had the season that he wants. He's really tough to cover one-on-one, so he could find an opening in this game and totally change it at the drop of a hat. Latsier Brooks is going to make big-time plays in this one. Isaiah Horton's incredible against man coverage because he's one of the better route runners you will find in the entire country. It's going to be really, really fun to watch this one unfold. I think there is one massive mismatch in this football game that I worry about massively as we head into it. I think Curt Cignetti, I think Bryant Haynes, I think that defensive staff is going to do such a good job scheming up pressures against an offensive line that I massively worry about for Alabama that I don't think Ty Simpson ever really gets comfortable. I think they're massively one-dimensional. I don't think they're really able to run the football because that offensive line is just guessing for most of the game. I think Indiana's too smart. They're too well-oiled, I suppose is the best way to put it. And I think Alabama has too many squeaky wheels for me to feel confident in that. I'm going to take Indiana to win at 27-17. I think it's probably 20-17 late in this football game, and then Indiana makes one big play to totally change it. I can't fully trust that Alabama offensive line in particular to hold up against a group that is losing. A guy like Stephen Daly does such a good job of throwing different pressure packages and different things at a quarterback that if he's not playing with confidence early, I don't think he's finding it halfway through this football game. I'll take Indiana to win it. I think Alabama's very live to get this one close and maybe even pull it off if Ty Simpson's hitting the right buttons. Ole Miss against Georgia down there in the Sugar Bowl to finish off this quarterfinals. It's going to be really fun. The only rematch that we get in the second round, and this one's really, really interesting. It was a game over there in Athens that Georgia was able to win 43-35. They were down late in that game, as they have been a number of times throughout this season, but they found a way to get it done. Ole Miss didn't force a punt the entire day. Brett Thorson was very, very bored on that afternoon. Can they do it in this game? That is the big-time question, and really on the other side of the ball for Georgia, they didn't force a punt until the fourth quarter. They're a whole lot better than they were. They're much better in much better in pass coverage. They're much better in the pass rush. They get after teams now, and they play a lot more together. There's not those very obvious young players that are making mistakes, missing assignments, that type of thing. Just doesn't happen as often for Georgia. How much of a difference is it? Because this is going to be the biggest challenge that they face since they've played Ole Miss the last time. So that's the big time question is how much better have they gotten? Will those openings still exist for Ole Miss to take advantage of? For Ole Miss, I'm very curious. We talked about it going into the Ole Miss Tulane game. Ole Miss does have a coach. I don't want to say a coaching problem. That's the wrong way to put it. There is a coaching edge for Georgia in this football game. It didn't show up against Tulane for very obvious reasons. Ole Miss is bigger, faster, and stronger than Tulane. Now it could show up. Losing Lane Kiffin and that offense maybe just being a tick slower. Not necessarily a ton, but just slightly slower. That defense, with Pete Golding having to deal with 1,000,001 different things as the head coach, does that defense take a slight step back? And frankly, they might not even need to for Gunnar Stockton to have a great day against them. But this is where that would really show up. I think I talked about it going into Tulane just on the off chance that there was a lot going wrong for that football team. There wasn't, very obviously. This is a game where only a little bit has to go wrong. And frankly, nothing could go wrong, and you could still lose this football game. So that is something to watch. How much has this offense and defense really changed since that first matchup where everything was intact? There wasn't the Florida job hanging over their head. There was a lot of confidence in that Ole Miss program. There still very much is, just a lot of changes to talk about as well. The biggest change for the Georgia team over this season from the last time these two teams played to today is the D-line play, as far as I'm concerned. No one plays the ball, I should rephrase that. No one runs the ball on this football team consistently. That just doesn't happen. It really didn't happen early in the year. It's especially not happening now. And the pass rush is tons more dangerous. They are way better on the edge. Now, losing a guy like Gabe Harris is something to watch. He will not play in this game. Huge impact player for that team. But Hugh Johnson on one side is an absolute nightmare. We've seen Elo Mendoza at times for this team, but not quite as often. Josh Horton was a huge player in this game the first time around. It is going to be fascinating to watch what happens with this team. How does Ole Miss kind of combat that? Are they up to the challenge of combating a much better Georgia defense as far as I'm concerned? I think it's going to be super fun to watch. I think both these teams have a ton to gain from this game. Obviously, Ole Miss is fighting to prove that they're not just Lane Kiffin. They're not just a coach that put them in great positions throughout the year. They want to prove they're a little bit different. I think Georgia's a little bit angry because you'll remember that the last time they walked into that building, Notre Dame ended their season. I think they're going to get a little bit of juice out of that. I think Ole Miss will be ready to roll. I think there will be a really, really close game at halftime. And then the Georgia defense makes a couple of big-time plays late. I'll take Georgia to win this one 34-23. I think Gunnar Stockton's going to have a great day. I think that defense is going to get after Trinidad Chambliss and not allow him to make plays with his legs the way he did the first time around. I think Georgia's able to win this one relatively comfortably as they could have hoped winning this game, and they'll move forward to face off against, in my estimation, Ohio State, but we'll see what Miami can do, and then it'd be Carson Beck against his former team, and that would be something to watch. But we'll talk about that when and if it does come to fruition. I'll take Georgia to win that game over there in New Orleans and move on to the semifinals. But really incredible games. 8 teams that are more than deserving of going into these quarterfinals. And I think we're going to walk out of it thinking all 4 of these teams can win a national title. There's no doubt about that. I don't think it matters who wins. If Miami beats Ohio State, I'm talking myself into them very quickly as a national title favorite. Alabama, the exact same thing against Indiana. Ole Miss would be fully on board of Trinidad Chambliss being efficient as can be, beating Georgia, and then things get really interesting in a hurry. And I don't think I have to sell too many people on Oregon or Texas Tech. I think they're firmly in the mix regardless. But going to be really, really fun to watch this one unfold. Obviously, we will talk about them probably on Friday. We'll be back here to break down all of those games. But we got other stuff to talk about. We got to talk about the bowl games that have happened. There's been a whole lot of them. So we'll try to go through this quickly, but we'll do a little bit of a bowl cleanup right after this. So stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the quarterfinals going on in the next couple of days. I do have Ohio State beating Miami tomorrow. I got Oregon, I got Indiana, and I got Georgia winning on New Year's Day. And we got some incredible semifinals coming after that as far as I'm concerned. But let's go ahead and jump into some bowl season. A lot has happened. Again, apologies for last week, got a little bit away from me, but we got a lot of games to talk about. And we'll start with, I think, everyone's favorite bowl game at this very moment, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, an incredible one between BYU and Georgia Tech. BYU able to get the win 25-21 in this one. This is an awesome event. It's one of those things that's so ridiculous, so weird, so niche that it works. All those players buy into what this is. It's not the playoff. It is not playing for a national title. It's not the most intense thing in the world, but it's really fun football, and it's two really good teams that deserve this type of platform. And a team in Notre Dame sitting at home having to watch all this unfold, and a lot of their fans acting like they're too good for the Pop-Tart Bowl. But regardless, it was a really fun one. Georgia Tech's a team that we'll talk about this more probably in a couple of weeks as things start to wind down for the season. They got hit by a recalibration of expectations. 9-4, I think, would have been agreed to by about 95 to 99% of Georgia Tech fans heading into the season. Not after the 8-0 start. After 8-0 start, they were eyeing a ACC title and a playoff berth. You fell a little bit short of that, and that does have to stink. I think Brent Key did not handle this game quite as well as I thought. Haynes King didn't play the football that I've become accustomed to him playing, in a really tough way for a really special career to end for Haynes King. Tumultuous at the beginning, saw through a lot of that Jimbo Fisher era over there at A&M, came over to Georgia Tech and found some really incredible success. Not the way he wanted to end it, but a really remarkable career for him. For BYU, you get Bear Bachmeier back for a sophomore season next year, and you just won 12 games. I can't imagine what they're going to be in 2026. I think they're going to be right back there up at the top of the Big 12, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch what Kalani Sitake can do with this team. Obviously, Texas Tech will get in the mix. I'll talk about Eric Morris and Oklahoma State. I think they could be in the mix very quickly here, but we'll talk about that as it unfolds. BYU's got a very bright future and the coach and quarterback to get there. Penn State wins this one 21-10 over Clemson, the Pinstripe Bowl up there in New York City. A ton of respect to Terry Smith. This is a football team in Penn State that it was a sinking ship, and it would have been very easy for all of these guys to jump off board, for this thing to sink to the bottom, for them to go 4-8, and this season to be an absolute disaster. He found a way to pull them all the way back in. The fact that Deni Dennis Sutton played in this football game is proof enough. This was a 6-6 team. No one would have blamed Deni Dennis Sutton for deciding to go to the NFL draft and not playing in this game, not risking injury. He played, and he played his butt off in this football game. It was incredible to watch, and really an incredible finish to the season. That was very frustrating for Penn State fans. I think you have incredible days ahead, and we'll talk about that when we talk about those head coach hirings, maybe even on Friday. We'll get into that a little bit further because I think you guys nailed it. But for Clemson, we'll talk about it more. Obviously, there's got to be questions about Dabo. They did fire Garrett Riley, the OC, which I felt like was a layup of a decision as far as I'm concerned. Still tons that need to be done. I saw they were in on Lyric Rawls, a really talented safety from Kansas, so maybe Dabo is starting to learn the error of his ways. The question is it a little bit too late for that, with Miami doing what they're doing down there and an ACC that's still relatively wide open, but a couple of teams are pretty far ahead of you when it comes to the portal game. Can they catch up in time is a big question. Does Dabo want to catch up is probably a bigger question. But respect to Terry Smith and Penn State for finishing this thing off the right way. That'll be a very different team this time next year, and I'll be fascinated to see what Matt Campbell can do. Virginia gets a 13-7 win over Missouri, an absolute rock fight in this one. This is a tough Virginia team, and it really has been all season. A special year for the Cavaliers. They get to 11 wins, something that I'm not sure a lot of people outside Brandon Walker did love the Virginia Cavaliers coming in, but it was an incredible team to watch. It was a team that fell a little bit short of what they wanted to be, obviously. They really wanted to be a playoff team. They wanted to win the ACC, and it was there for the taking. But you find a way to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and beat a really good Missouri team. Not a fantastic team, but absolutely a physically imposing team. For Missouri, this one has to feel a little bit of a missed opportunity. This season started so strong. Beau Pribolo is playing really great football, and you ultimately fall short. You lose to Alabama. You lose Beau Pribolo midway through the season. Now he's off to another school, probably Virginia Tech, and we'll talk about that on Friday more. But at the end of the day, you got to feel confident about who you have in Eli Drinkwitz. You got to feel confident that he can retool this roster. It's going to be quite a bit of retooling. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be a very different team when you head into next season. I think that probably starts at the quarterback position, with all due respect to Matt Zollers. Houston gets a 38-35 win over LSU. Really great performance from this Houston offense, and ton of respect to Willie Fritz. Probably one of the best coaching jobs in the entire country that no one's talking about. Houston gets to 10 wins. Connor Wegman plays great football really throughout this year, but especially in this football game. Dean Connors, one of the more underrated running backs in the entire country. And Tanner Koziel, you will see on Sundays for a long time. He's got one more year down there in Houston, though. For LSU, I don't know how much this one hurt y'all. I don't know how much this one tore you guys up inside. I think you understand this is going to be a very different team next year. Now, Michael Van Buren played some good football, so maybe that guy sticks around and is a little bit of a safety option for you, but the O-line has already started to kind of be decimated. I think they're waiting on Thursday. They're waiting to see if they can get into the Ole Miss player sweepstakes, and then we'll see what happens with this football team moving forward. But it's going to be pretty much an entirely new crew down there in Baton Rouge in 2026. An incredible year for Houston, though. One that should be applauded a ton, and definitely a team I'm watching very closely heading into 2026. All the rest of them. Old Dominion gets a win over South Florida. Really fun game. Delaware beats Louisiana, a team that really deserves a lot of respect. Did some great things this season. Western Michigan kind of took Kennesaw State to the woodshed. Hate to see that happen to the Owls, but an incredible year for them nonetheless. NC State. A lot of talk about C.J. Bailey in that portal and see what he's going to do. We'll talk about that, obviously, as it unfolds. Louisville wins one over Toledo 27-22. Miller Moss probably out the door as far as I'm concerned. They're probably bringing in a new portal guy, and that'll be a fascinating thing to watch with Jeff Brom sticking around there for the time being. Ohio beats UNLV. Really, really interesting dynamic around Ohio, but they found a way to get through that, and they move forward with pretty bright future under their new head coach. Going to be really fun to watch that one. The Hawaii-Cal game was as crazy as you will find in this bowl season, all over the place in that game, but Hawaii finds a way to get that one done on home turf. You had North Texas sneak away from San Diego State. Felt like they were going to blow them out, and then San Diego State found a way to backdoor cover there. Can't imagine North Texas bettors were too happy about that one. And a couple other games here. Army gets a big-time win over UConn. Didn't love the way UConn players approached that game, but at the end of the day, I'm not one here to judge. A lot of that we will talk about when we get into a more comprehensive look at bowl season, because I think there's small ways to fix it. Not entire ways, and it won't be perfect going forward, but I think there's small ways to make this a little bit better. Apologies, we had to kind of fit all this in very quickly, but some incredible games here and some games that really showed why there are still kids out there that really do care about bowl season. Moving forward to a couple of games that will happen over the next couple of days. One tomorrow, the ReliaQuest Bowl against Iowa and Vandy. I think everyone's here to see Diego Pavia. Is he going to be around in 2026? Probably not. I think he still has a lawsuit pending. I think some other people have jumped onto that lawsuit, so I don't know if Diego Pavia is involved or not. Regardless, it's going to be a little bit messy. I would have to imagine Diego Pavia is trying to find his way back into college football regardless. He's probably off to the NFL after this year, and that'll be a fascinating thing to watch. For me, I'm excited to watch number 2 strap it up one more time for Vandy and see what happens. It's going to be a really, really fun game. Obviously, Iowa going through a little bit of change. Mark Gronowski playing his last football game as well, so 2 wily vets getting after it in this one. I will take Vanderbilt. I think they go into 2026 with quite a bit of confidence. I think their quarterback is gone, and we'll see what it looks like without Diego Pavia around there in Vanderbilt, because that's been the big question. What happens after that guy walks out the door? We'll find out in a couple of months, but this is his last chance to do a little bit of a victory lap. I think he does it in kind of fashion and is able to get a win here. Michigan versus Texas in the Citrus Bowl, the one leading up to the first playoff game between Ohio State and Miami. It doesn't need to be said. Michigan has gone through one of the weirdest last months a lot of these players have probably ever gone through. They lose their coach in Sharon Moore in crazy circumstances. They have a crazy coaching search going on around them. And now they're meeting their new coach. Pretty much leading up to this football game, they're talking to Kyle Whittingham about what the future holds. Are they sticking around? Are they going into the portal the day after this game? A lot of stuff on the tables. Texas fired Pete Kwiatkowski and moved on from him, and now you're looking around and it's probably going to be Johnny Nansen calling plays. What does that look like? Is there more opening for Bryce Underwood? And there was already openings in that secondary, especially for Texas late in that season. We'll see what happens in that one. But the story is Bryce Underwood against Arch Manning. Let's just be totally honest. 2 of the more talked about, 2 of the more scrutinized players in all of college football, because they got quite a big dollar figure next to their name. So will be really interesting to see what these guys do. I'm going to lean towards the guy with more experience. Arch Manning has been more comfortable, more confident, and much better down the stretch of this season. I'll take Texas to win this one. I'll take Arch Manning to have a great game, and as you can imagine, the Heisman talk for 2026 to kick up very, very quickly around that kid. The rest of the bowl season coming up over the next couple of days. Coastal Carolina, Louisiana Tech, and the Independence Bowl, two really, really fun teams that have done some incredible things this year. Tennessee, Illinois, an interesting matchup in the Music City Bowl. This will be really fun. Tennessee, probably the last time you see Joey Aguilar. What do they do in the portal when it comes to quarterback? Do they have to? He seems to be trying to join in maybe on that Diego Pavia train and see what can happen there. Illinois, definitely the last time we're going to see Luke Altmaier. Will be really cool to see that. TCU against USC, they've lost Josh Hoover to the portal. We'll see what USC looks like with Jaden Mayav and all the quote-unquote re-signings. That's something we'll talk about later as well. Arizona State Duke, a really fun game in the Sun Bowl that will be Jeff Sims last time around the block in college football. As crazy as that sounds, he was still around, but this will be the last time he gets to tote the rock for that team. Nebraska, Utah, a very interesting game. Nebraska all over the place. Utah pretty much all over the place in a lot of different ways with coaching changes there. We have Rice, Texas State, really fun game in the Armed Forces game. Navy, Cincy, going to be incredible. Liberty Bowl, Arizona, SMU, two teams that kind of went under the radar, but played really good football throughout this year in the Holiday Bowl. Going to be really fun to watch that one. And then Wake Forest, Mississippi State, two teams that found their way in because a couple of teams found their way out by opting out of this bowl season, but can't wait to see Mississippi State. Hoping Kamario Taylor gets the start, but we'll see if Blake Shapen gets a couple of runs as it is his last college football game. But I'll be honest, I want to see Kamario Taylor out there. If I'm being totally honest, I think Bulldog fans are with me on that one. But going to be really fun to watch this bowl season come to an end. Obviously, there's plenty to talk about how we fix bowl season. Is it fixable? Can we ever move back? There's a lot of different questions. There's no doubt about that. But we'll get into that in due time. For right now, we'll celebrate those games and hopefully bring as much juice to them as we possibly can. Some great ones over the next couple of days. But let's go ahead and finish this out. We'll talk about Kyle Whittingham getting hired by Michigan. We'll talk about D'Anton Lynn leaving USC for Penn State and what that could possibly mean. We'll talk about the G5 spot for a second. Another rant we'll get into more later on. Some portal news, Notre Dame, USC. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about bowl season. Whole lot has happened since the last time we've talked, so had to go a little bit rapid fire there, but a lot of really, really great bowl games. That Pop-Tart Bowl, I can't get enough of it. I'll be totally honest with you. But let's get a little bit of a headline catch up here, and we'll start with the biggest one that happened very quickly and kind of, I don't want to say out of nowhere. Michigan hires Kyle Whittingham, not away from Utah, but Kyle Whittingham recently had left Utah. It was reported initially that he was retiring. Didn't seem like he was retiring at all. It seemed like he was just looking for a new opportunity. Seemed like the university and him kind of came to a decision that probably the best time for him to move on, Morgan Scalley to kind of slide into there and see if he can keep that train rolling over there at Utah. Michigan nailed it. There's really no other way to put it. This guy is absolutely incredible. I think he's the single most underrated coach in the entire country. I think he's a top 10 coach in the entire country. When you talk about just getting your guys ready, scouting and attacking your opponent the right way, very few people do it better than Kyle Whittingham does it. The other part of this that has to be talked about, that was never not going to be talked about, you needed a guy that people could look at and trust. That's just the reality of that program right now. Obviously, the Michigan man thing is a very real thing for that fan base and for that athletic department, for that board. They wanted a guy that they felt like they could look at and say, at least we have someone that people look up to. At least we have someone that people really like, that they really enjoy, that kind of oozes stability, as best as I can put it. That is Kyle Whittingham. There's no two ways about that. He's done an incredible job at Utah for a very long time. That's the other question here. He's 66 years old. How long do you have him? To me, it doesn't really matter in some sense. I think it's a great hire regardless if he's there for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. I think you nailed it. I think there's a guy that can bring short-term stability. If he's only there for 2 or 3 years, he can bring long-term stability if he wants to coach until he's 75 years old and then hand it off to someone else. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, we'll know more as this develops, but regardless, I think you absolutely nailed it. the staff built around him is going to be massive. Obviously, it sounds like he is going to bring in Jason Beck, which, if I'm Bryce Underwood, I badly want to play in that offense, but that's a conversation for another day when we get into the portal a little bit more on Friday. But at the end of the day, if he brings him over, absolutely great hire. It sounds like Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator for BYU, is going to come on over, which interesting dynamic there. But at the end of the day, a great defensive coordinator that worked with Kyle Whittingham at Utah prior to going to BYU. Fantastic. Absolutely someone that, given that level of talent over there at Michigan, can do some really special things. There's no doubt about that. But elite in every sense of the word. There's really no other way to put it. I think there's a lot of different questions that you have to talk about moving forward, especially for 2026 with, does Bryce Underwood stick around? Does Andrew Marsh stick around, the talented wide receiver? It sounds like Jordan Marshall is going to be there, which is massive news for this team, but there's probably going to be a lot of changes. There's probably going to be a lot of guys moving in and out of that program over the next little bit. If he can navigate it right with the right people around him, with the right recruiting staff around him, he's going to do remarkable things. It might take a little bit of time. 2026 might be rough, depending on that Bryce Underwood decision, depending on that Andrew Marsh decision, and a lot of others, obviously. But at the end of the day, this is a very good head coach. If they can get him the talent, if they can get him the resources that he deserves, and I don't want to say lacked at Utah, but didn't have Michigan level at Utah, he can win national titles. That's what I think of Kyle Whittingham. We'll see how this develops, obviously. We'll see what the portal holds for them here coming up, and it's going to be an interesting time over there in Ann Arbor, but more than anything, you nailed a hire when you badly needed to. Other coaching news, D'Anton Lynn leaves USC for Penn State to become their defensive coordinator. A massive hire by Matt Campbell. He absolutely nailed it. He's done a great job, has Lynn over there at USC. And there's a whole lot less to fix over there at Penn State than there was at USC when he showed up. There was a whole lot to fix over there at USC. That has since been fixed, and he has moved on to Penn State. They can compete in 2026. There's no doubt about that. Another team that the portal is going to be very interesting to watch for, but regardless, D'Anton Lynn's a great defensive coordinator, and if you give him the right talent, he can have a top 10, top 15 defense in the entire country year in, year out. That's what I think of that guy. And the funny thing is here, I think Texas hiring Will Muschamp gave Penn State the opening to hire this guy. As crazy as that sounds, Texas hires Will Muschamp. They fire Pete Kwiatkowski. There was a big-time buyout in D'Anton Lynn's contract that really would only go down if USC decided to be a little bit more flexible with that. It sounds like Pete Kwiatkowski getting on the market might have been the thing that created that to happen. I think Pete Kwiatkowski will be hired by USC here very shortly. I think he's going to be a great defensive coordinator there, as he was at Texas. I think it's going to work out for all these teams. I think Will Muschamp brings exactly what Texas needs to that locker room and changes kind of the approach a little bit. I think D'Anton Lynn's the perfect person for Penn State to get that defense where it needs to be. And I think PK can use the USC talent really effectively in his approach. I think it's going to work out for everyone, and it just took Will Muschamp being willing to come back into coaching to make it all happen. But for Penn State, you continue to fill out a truly elite staff. Now the work in the portal is probably more important, if I'm being totally honest, but you get the right players in there. I think you have one of the best trios in the entire country. In Matt Campbell and Porter Moser and D'Anton Lynn, I cannot deny these guys. They're so darn good, and I think Penn State could be rolling in 2026 under Matt Campbell. Let's talk about the group of 6 spot here for a second in the playoff. I wanted to touch on it just before we move forward and kind of forgot that JMU and Tulane were in these playoffs, but we got to talk about it, and it will be talked about much more over the next couple of months as we get closer to those debates of sorts that will happen about this college football playoff. I don't know where they're meeting, but some fancy boardroom is where all these commissioners will meet, and they'll figure out what they're going to do moving forward. I think they're in trouble. I think there's no doubt about that. I don't necessarily think it's even the results that did it. Obviously, that helps kind of the more, this is going to sound mean, the more casual of fans to kind of understand the difference in this. But here's the reality. Since those 2 games have happened, JMU's lost everyone. North Texas has lost absolutely everyone. USF has lost everyone. It's not a world that is going to be conducive to these G5 teams being able to ever compete for a national title, even if they are in the playoff. Now, I've said this before. I addressed it earlier before the playoff got started. I have no problem with the G5 being in, especially if the G5 is getting in because it's the Power 4 team's fault. In this case, JMU got in because the ACC was so uniquely terrible that they had an 8-5 team win their conference championship. I don't have a problem with that. I do have something of a problem with the number 24 team in the country getting into a playoff, and that's where the debate kind of starts. Is it you have to meet a required ranking to get in? Is it you just take out the auto bid for the G5 altogether? You have to earn your way in no matter what. There's a lot on the table. Do they get rid of just the top 5 conference champs and say the Power 4 and then one group of 5 to avoid the 2 group of 5 situation? I think that's more on the table than some of the other stuff. I don't necessarily think we're going to have the G5 get totally cut off from this thing. We talked about it. I do think it is a lawsuit antitrust type of thing because you probably would love to do it. I don't think you legally can do it if you're some of these commissioners out there. So that's something to watch. I've talked about it before. I think a G5 playoff would be incredible to watch. I think it would be better for these teams, and I think it could be fully subsidized by the Power 4 conferences and make this thing a very, I don't want to say an even trade because it wouldn't be even. One would be deciding they were a lower tier conference, but it would be somewhere meeting in the middle. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in those debates. I do know for a fact it's going to be really hard without some actual laws in place in some cases to get G5 out of the playoff unless they fully decide on their own volition to do it. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So we'll see what happens with this developing. We'll talk about it more as this kind of develops and see where the G5 sits going forward, but I'd be a little bit nervous about that spot. I think they're going to have all the firepower in the world to throw at them in those debates. Will they be able to pull it off? Will the G5 stick around? I kind of hope so, but really, really hard to fight that battle right now, and we'll see how they fight it going forward. Probably into February is when a lot of this stuff will unfold, and we'll get an idea of where the G5 sits going forward. Some quick portal news. We'll get into this much more depth on Friday. We'll go through all the rankings and all that good stuff. But South Carolina doing a great job of retaining guys. Lenora Sellers is back. Nick Harbor's back. Dylan Stewart's back. Incredible for them to be able to keep those 3 guys in-house. Sound like Dylan Stewart might have been on a plane to Baton Rouge pretty quickly if he was not still in Columbia, but he has stuck around. Massive for them. We'll see what happens with that team. I have the same question about the team going into next year that I did in this one. Do they have the depth around those guys to be actually special? I have massive questions about that. But we'll see how that develops. A massive thing keeping those 3 guys. Now you fill out the rest of it around them. North Texas has lost their big-time trio as expected in a lot of ways. Drew Mestemaker is off into the portal, probably an Indiana against Oklahoma State battle there. That'll be a really interesting thing to watch. We also had Caleb Hawkins. Oklahoma State's in it. Oklahoma, Texas is in this one, especially if the next guy we talk about it doesn't jump in. I'd bet Texas to go very aggressively in on Caleb Hawkins and see if they can pull him in. And then Wyatt Young, a great player. I'd expect him to be at Oklahoma State. Of all of these 3, I'd most readily bet that Wyatt Young ends up as a Cowboy. I think all 3 of them very well could because Eric Morris did incredible things for those guys. I would bet Mestemaker is going to be at Oklahoma State. I think Caleb Hawkins is a little bit more up in the air because there's a lot of high-profile teams that need running backs, largely that one down there in Austin. There's no doubt about that. And that actually brings us to Jaden Baugh, a big-time update on the Florida running back. It's entirely up in the air. It doesn't even seem like Florida feels fully confident on where they stand right now. I don't know if Texas does either. I don't know if they know what this guy's going to do. If I had to bet, I'd say he's going to enter the portal. If I had to bet, I'd say he's going to be a Texas Longhorn next year. That's just the way I'm leaning right now. I think they have the strongest NIL package. They obviously have Jabbar Jalouk as their new running back coach who was at Florida a year ago. I think Jaden Baugh is probably going to be a Texas Longhorn next year. It's still very much up in the air, and if he's not, then I think you see Caleb Hawkins get a very, very hard look from the Longhorns, and we'll see how that develops. Tend to believe it's going to happen here pretty soon. Well, kind of has to happen here pretty soon, but we'll see how that develops, and we'll see where Texas factors in on that one. The big one from this week is Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman, the talented Auburn wide receiver, an outright difference maker. It sounds like A&M and Texas are the top teams to watch. Bama and UGA are going to get involved here. It's heard some rumblings around Ohio State. I don't think it's going to be worth the price tag for them, but I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch. I would bet on A&M. I think they have both the most ability to spend the money and the most need to spend the money at that position. Now, Ashton Bethel-Roman coming back, Mario Craver coming back, maybe they don't feel the same way, but I'd lean towards A&M. I think Texas will get firmly involved in this thing and pitch A.D. Mitchell as kind of the guy that he could be. Would be a very good pitch as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see what happens there. An incredible, incredible player. And obviously, we'll talk about it more on Friday as this thing opens up. We'll go through all the rankings. We'll go through teams to watch. And you can imagine Texas is going to be one of them. They'll be very, very active this time around. USC Notre Dame. It's going away. It sounds like in 2026 it is going away for indefinitely. I don't really think they have a good date on when they're going to get this thing back up and running. Sounds like 2030 could be a date, I suppose. I don't know. It's a ridiculous, ridiculous thing. It's one of those things that I'm not going to have a new take on this one. I hate it. I think both both the administrations and football programs for these teams are being a little bit short-sighted. I think USC saying, well, if we're going to play it, we're going to play it in week 0 so we don't get hurt later in the season is soft as can be. I think Notre Dame saying, no, we'll never play. We won't play it in week 0 instead of just saying, all right, spot the ball. And if we win it, we get to reschedule it next time around. I think it's kind of lame on both sides. I really don't have much more to say about this. If it does force Notre Dame into the Big Ten, sure, then that works, I suppose. Although the conference would get bigger and more complicated. But at the end of the day, you hate it. There should be a number of conference or rivalries in general that just have to be played every single year. Although Bedlam should be on that list, and it is not played thus far. I think Texas should probably be on that list, but again, is not played right now. So we'll see what happens going forward with this. I like to think that they're going to find a way to get this thing played. The problem is if you're going to continue to tell people that late game losses count more than early game, you're probably still going to get the same pitch from USC to have it on week 0. And you're probably going to get the same answer from Notre Dame every time they say that. So it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. You hate to see it go. Hopefully it'll be back soon. USC is going to play BYU over the next couple of years instead of this game. So still a pretty fun game there, but not the one you want. There's no doubt about that. This is a game that should be played every single year, and more than anything, it's the people that don't really care about college football getting in the way of college football once again. But we'll see what happens with this one going forward, and hopefully they find a solution here. And then to finish off the show, the FCS title is set. It is going to be an incredible, incredible game. Illinois State against Montana State, January 5th at 7:30 in Nashville. It is going to be awesome to watch these two teams go at it. It's a Cinderella against a dominating power. Illinois State walked into this tournament 8-4. They were able to knock off the massive on-odds favorite in North Dakota State, 29-28 earlier in the season, or earlier in the tournament, beat Villanova in the semifinal, and they find their way to play Montana State, the best team in the FCS right now. Obviously, North Dakota State was for the vast majority of the year. Montana State, incredible football team. Justin Lamson, incredible quarterback that's doing great things for them. It's going to be a really, really fun to watch. We got Taco Dowdler. Yes, Taco Dowdler, real guy. Incredible wide receiver for Montana State. It's going to be really fun to watch. I think Illinois State's going to fight in this one. We will give a full pick on Friday, so I won't tip anything, but going to be an incredible game over there in Nashville. Two teams that I really think if you turn them on, you're going to be shocked at how high level some of the football is. Going to be a really, really fun one there in Nashville, and we'll see if Montana State can win a national title. Incredible next couple of days that we got. We got 4 games that, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's the 8 best teams in the country. I really do. I think these are the teams that I would dub as the 8 best teams in the country, and they get to go at it over the next couple of days to decide who's the 4 best teams in the country. And I think we're going to have 4 teams that absolutely capable of winning a national title no matter who wins these next couple of days. Enjoy it all. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. We'll be back on Friday to break them all down. We'll talk about the portal that opens on Friday. We'll talk about the rankings of that and where everyone might be going. LSU is going to be active. Miami, Texas, a lot of teams are going to be very active, and there will be a lot to talk about. So we'll be back on Friday to break down all of the quarterfinal games, to get into maybe a little bit more of the Kyle Whittingham talk and all of that stuff, especially with the portal opening. We'll talk about all of it on Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. Helps me out a ton, so please do that. And I will see you guys on Friday to break down some incredible college football playoff matchups.